welcome back to the Allegheny Northern in N-scale, and today we are going to talk about vehicles. And so going back to some other videos that I've posted probably a year or two back, where I went through all the vehicles on the layout, because one of the number one questions that I get asked is where I got a lot of the vehicles on my layout. And so, being somebody in the construction industry, I started, like a lot of folks in the construction industry, with a passion for heavy equipment as a child, and then that sort of grew on up through until, well, it became a career. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that I have a lot of heavy equipment on my layout, and I like to do construction related scenes. And that's probably why I like the mow equipment just as much as anything else on the railroad. And so it's really hard, especially in N-scale, to find modern construction equipment and modern maintenance of way equipment and just modern vehicles in general. And so, come the advent of 3D printing, that got a lot better for us in N-scale, because folks who took the time to learn the programming made a lot of 3D models. And so, just let me show you. This is something that I picked up in Altoona and last year. So this is a 2024 pickup, but it's a 3D printed triaxle. And just I want to show you the parts and pieces here. I'm not gonna build this today, but I did show you the one that I built last year or the year before, and so you kind of know what this thing looks like. But the dump body, okay, it's pretty basic, but the dump body is basic. It's nice that they got the rungs and all this stuff, in. It looks like separately applied details when you look at it. Um, you know, cab, it's nicely done, right? Good underbody detail for N-scale. And these little metal pins here actually act as axles, so you can get the truck to roll. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Like, that's a nice feature here. And if you look at some of the smaller details, like the exhaust pipe here, if it'll focus, you can see that they have the detail on it. And this model actually gives you an engine, and it's a little hard to see there, but so you can do a lot of really cool stuff in 3D. And it goes, I lost some extra pieces that are still in here. It goes a long way in really adding realism to your layout when you can use these 3D printed, highly detailed models, which we have to do in N-scale, because we don't get the same stuff that folks in HO scale get, or even O scale, that can pull from the 1 to 50 scale replicas. So you guys have a lot more advantages than we do here on the smaller scale. So, but with 3D printing now, we can pretty much create anything that we want, and we sort of expanded our market. So when I go to shows, I try to find as many people selling 3D printed stuff as I can, because, well, I really like that stuff. Okay, now today we're talking about metal kits, though. That's going to be the primary feature that we're going to go through here. And this is a Showcase Miniatures. It's just a van truck, and it gives you the option to make it as either a single or tandem truck. And these things are really nice. Okay, so if you ever had one of these kits, there are other metal kits that are out there. I think that these are probably some of the nicer ones. They all come in little kits like this, where all the pieces are, individually sort of wrapped. Bigger pieces are kind of free, but it's a combination. Like, this is a 3D printed piece, but the rest of it's all metal. So I have no problem with that mix of parts and pieces. And then if the model's particularly complicated, you do get a set of directions, which is nice. And in some of the other manufacturers, you get the directions regardless of the complication. So depending on whether or not you need the directions, you get them. And then something like, if you were to build, say, a kit like this, you definitely want the directions, because when I show you how this thing looks in here, it's just there's just a lot of pieces in here. And then not only do you get the metal pieces, but of course you also have all these etched pieces as well. And then if you are really, 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 really creative, they actually have detailing parts that you can get as well for like exhausts, mirrors, another set of mirrors, and another set of exhausts. But like if you wanted to add detail above and beyond to some of your models or some of your existing models, it's really a nice option. So for me, and I'm not showing this to you to necessarily highlight showcase miniatures, but just in general for metal kits, these are the kind of kits that I really really like. And just a couple of really quick tips on the best way to do these. First of all, for glues, you are going to want a glue that is quick setting. So the super glue gel from Gorilla Glue, you can use any super glue gel or any CA, especially if it's got an accelerant that you can use to quicken the dry, is really good. Because what happens is once you set the piece, especially when you're just starting out, everything kind of wants to move on you, and you need some way to calm it down, basically. So this glue is a great way to do it because the bond is pretty quick. And so just a small amount of the glue on either side, and you can pretty much just get the piece to look, fit right where you want it. And then once you're happy with it, just hold it for a few seconds and let it dry. Now, I was kind of curious because on this particular piece, on this particular model, the glue for some reason didn't want to set up as fast as it normally did, and I had no idea why. It was staying kind of, and I can tell you right now, see, like it's not sticking. I don't know why. I don't know if I didn't do a good job cleaning off the residue or what. But if I give it a few minutes, it will dry enough that it'll set. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Then you get this nice van component here. It's plastic, but because I'm gluing it to metal, I'm gonna do the same process here with the glue. So that is these are really nice models, and the reason I'm highlighting these at all is just because when you do these models, they're a lot of fun, and take your time with them because you're going to see that set. So you're going to find out that one, you're really going to enjoy the build, and two, you can actually detail and weather them up really nice, and so they make really eye-catching models on your layout. So for those of us who are not N scale or not HO scale or O scale, and we're stuck in the N scale with needing to find some decent N scale models, this is the way to go. And then you do get your mirrors and things like that. They're pretty self-explanatory as to what they are, but if you do get in a jam, you can always go back and look at the picture. Usually that will tell you what you're looking at here. So like I was sitting here looking, going, what the hell is this thing? Okay, well it's the refrigeration unit or whatever that is that goes up here. So okay, if you're not doing a refrigerated unit, you could probably just leave that off. Otherwise, it does have a little place for it right there. You can see it, and then it goes together. So it's not too hard to figure out. And then let's get on to the painting. So other than having to clear out some flash on these things, assemble them, they're pretty much ready to go. Things you're going to want to assemble: tweezers. Depending on how good your fingers are and how small they are, I have small fingers and they're usually still too big to do something like these rear view mirrors. So this helps you just get it into place and not go sending it flying. They do give you this plastic. This is how you do your windshield, and so a good sharp knife is also required. Same thing to just get these etched pieces off of here. You don't want to use pliers or snips or anything because it tends to bend them. So by placing this down on the on the cutting board here and then just pressing to release the pieces, that's the best way to do it. And I think the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about painting, because They're going to paint just like every other model, but I like to do what I call a scratch coat on these things, and I'll show you why here in just a second. I should tell you that if you are not an airbrush owner, this is a little bit more complicated. Possible, it's not like it's the end of the world, but the airbrush does make life a lot easier for this next step. So let me finish the assembly here, and then we will get on to the actual painting and finishing of this model. Okay, so here is the point where I'm probably going to make some of you cry. If you don't have an airbrush, what are you doing? Okay, now this is coming from a spot of, what do I want to say? This is coming from a spot of love for the hobby, okay? And I held off on an airbrush as long as I could. And then when I bought an airbrush, it wasn't like, well, I ran out and bought the most expensive airbrush. No, it was a Harbor Freight airbrush. It's an Avanti. It comes with a little compressor. So like we're not talking top of the line here, right? It's a basic dual function airbrush. Okay, and that's what you want. You want to be able to control the air separate from the paint volume. You can buy cheaper ones for like 15 or 16 bucks, and they're going to be a single action. You want the dual action. You want the double action because you want to be able to control the air and the paint. Now, I'm going to show you why here. Okay, so see how that paint went on? Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and repeat this so you can see it. And by see it, I mean hold it in place in front of the camera. See how that paint is just sort of smearing? It's thick and it's globby, and see how it's not really, see how you can see where the brush strokes are, and you can see that it's not covering, and in fact, the more you brush it, the worse it gets. Okay, that's why we're not going to use a brush. Now, there are some ways you can get around that. So if you want to say, no, I'm going to resist doing an airbrush, and I don't want an airbrush. Okay, you can get around that. And the way you get around that is you can spray some, I want to say some kind of a lacquer, or you can use a rattle can. You have some other options. Okay, so, and rattle cans are what I was using before I grew up and got a real airbrush. Okay, we are going to do a couple of things here. First, we're going to do just a little bit of airbrushing. I am using the surface primer from Vallejo, and I am going to use it full strength. Also going to turn on the fan here so that I got some air movement. I'm also going to move you out of my way, and hopefully you hear something more than the fan. Okay, so I've loaded up the black, and what I'm going to do is what I call a scratch coat, okay? And a scratch coat is just a very, very thin, very light coat that I'm going to let dry. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want this paint, even coming from the airbrush, I want it to grab onto something. And it's going to be that thin layer of paint, which I'm calling my scratch coat, that it's going to grab onto, okay? So I'm not looking to go real heavy. I'm just giving it something to bite onto. Okay? It's going to dry fast. This is a 100% primer. I don't have it thinned down in any way. And no flow improver. It's just it's designed to go through the airbrush, so it doesn't really need that stuff. And then once I get everything lightly coated, I'm going to go ahead in here and I'm going to start thickening things up. Nice thin layers, just darkening it up. I'm not too worried about the overspray. I'll show you why here in a minute. But you see how I'm getting a nice cover? And that's really what I want. Now we're going to switch modes here a little bit, and we are going to go to the old school brush. I'm using Vallejo. This is black gray, number 70.862. And this is perfect for tires, because tires, they're black when they first roll off the assembly line, but after they've been around a few miles, they start to get faded just from wear and tear, plus, being out in the sun. And they're not really black, they turn more gray. So this is a good color. right out of the can that you can use that will make that color look correct. And if you want to do a lighter gray, by all means, you can do that. Just take a look at what that really looks like in real life, and you'll get a pretty good idea of what you need to do. And you're going over a black sort of backdrop here with a primer, so it's just going to look black, but it'll dry with just enough gray in it that it'll look different. Okay, next we're going to come in with 70.950, which is just black. And we're going to go over the areas of the truck that are just black. And I know we have a black primer on here, but the primer coat does need a little bit of touch up. And you can see that now that I have the primer on here, this paint goes on nice and smooth, and it covers everything nicely. It adds that little bit of grip that this thing needs to hold the paint. So now we are going to be doing a truck here that is, I'm going to say, brand new right off the shop floor. And before we put it on the layout, if it's the desire of the modeler, you can go ahead and weather this thing up. So I think I'm probably going to end up putting it on the layout and then coming back and weathering it at another time. But you can, of course, just do it all at the same time. Just because I actually don't know, like I'm going to put a company logo on this at some point, but I don't know what the company is yet. So I don't want to finish it out necessarily. But if you're a little ahead in your planning and you just want to go ahead and add that all in right now, then, do your thing. But you can see now why I wasn't too worried about the overspray. Because, well, we're just not going to have any of it visible anymore, so it's not a big deal. And you will notice that this black is blacker than the primer. So you'll notice in areas where, like under the underside here, I don't know if you can see that or not. Maybe if I turn the light on, you can see it. Let's see, maybe. But that extra, that shine is not just because it's wet, but there's actually a difference in the gray and the blacks here. So we want the blacker black, for the underside. So we're going to go ahead and just paint these areas. You can dull them back down when you weather them if you want to, but for now, to get us to the factory start before we weathering, add the weathering, that's kind of what we want here. Okay, and now we're going to do the body of the truck. And we are using Vallejo 70.919 cold white. Vallejo paints are a really, really, really good paint. And because they're such a good paint, I don't really get too nervous about how they're going to cover or how they're going to appear when they're on the model. And what I mean by that is the pigments are really high quality, so they do a really nice job in painting. Okay, you can get some other paints that are not nearly as good, and those paints will streak on you, and they won't cover as well. And so if you're going to use a lesser quality paint, which is fine, I would say some of the testers paints probably fall in that category. Some of the model power paints probably fall in that category. But if you're using something like a Vallejo or an AK Interactive or say even a Citadel, and yes, these are all the miniature painting and the gamer painting paints, but they are really good paints, and they're not going to leave you the same sort of brush strokes and just poor coverage that some of the other paints are going to use. So I can get away with using a brush here, and it's not a big deal, and it's going to look fine. If you don't have a good paint, a good pigment paint, then you might have a little bit of an issue, and you may have to airbrush this phase, which is a lot of masking, to be honest with you. You'll get a nice clean coat, but it's a lot of masking. So go back to your rattle can, go back to your airbrush or whatever you need to get a nice clean coat, but you don't want to see any brush strokes. And this is pretty universal for all your models. It's not just specific to, well, I just painted the tire, that's not good. It's just not specific to painting the metal models here. But I'm using a very soft brush, and as you can see, I'm just making sure that I'm not pooling paint anywhere. I don't put your coats on real heavy. If you need to come back and do a second coat, that's better than trying to put them on real heavy and get everything in one swing. Just because what you'll end up with is big clumpy thick paint, and you'll lose some of the details. Plus, it just won't look as good. So We're going to paint as much of this as we can with the big brush, and then we're going to come back with a little detail brush when we do the second coat. But yeah, just keep your paint layers thin, and if you notice that they're too thick and that they're pooling, you can actually cut your paint a little bit with some thinner, just to get a little better of a, a little better look. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry because I don't want to keep touching wet paint. So we'll come back, we'll do the cab, and then we'll do the details, and we'll get to the final. On to the final steps now. So we have our model. It's been painted 2 coats of white, and yes, a full dry in between those 2 coats, because you want the primer to dry first, and then you want the 2 coats of white to dry in between. You don't want them to. You don't want to apply any coats over wet paint because it's not going to stick very well, and you're just going to end up wiping those subsequent layers off. And this is probably the most annoying part of this whole model, is doing these little wheels, just because you don't want to get it on the tire, and depending on how stable your hands are, and it's round, so you can't really like tape it off. It just sucks. You just gotta take your time and get a good brush. Actually, I want to see if I have a smaller brush, because it might take me a little bit less effort if I got something with a better point on it. Yeah, let's try this one. Yeah, it's a little bit better. A little less bristle and a little more, a little stiffer too. Which means it's going to take a little bit more time, but that's okay. We'll make this work. That one actually might be, I'm sitting there thinking that that's just a stiff brush, and I think it might actually need cleaned. It's a little too stiff. Go ahead and make all the stiff jokes you want, because that's what I would do. Here, let's try this one a little bit better here. Now, the problem with this paint is that this paint wants to, if you don't have a wet palette, this paint wants to dry really fast. And that is not helpful, because we don't want it to dry really fast. But we're going to go ahead and get this painted, and then we're going to come back for the next one. And that brings us to our final step, and this is the most probably tenuous of all of the steps. You're going to need the smallest, thinnest brush that you have, and you're going to take silver from whoever paint line you're running. And if you're using Vallejo, the one that I have is a, let's see, 80.052, and I'm using just the tiniest little brush, and that is to go over the horns and the lights and the mirrors. So the front of the mirrors I did in gunmetal, but the part that actually would represent the mirror I hit in silver. So that's a little bit brighter. That's just a personal preference. I mean, if you did the whole thing in gunmetal, I mean, you can see what scale, size we're looking at here. Will anybody know the difference? Probably not. But I know, and that's enough. And then I want to come up here in the front, and even though the grill is probably the appropriate color, being etched metal, I just go and give it a little silver as well. Helps me trim up some of that area where the paint might have gotten, that it shouldn't be. Just going to do the area where the lights are as well. And sometimes these models will have like, rear view mirror or rear brake lights. This one, it's really hard to see them on, so I'm going to leave that alone. I am going to do the door lock here on the back. As usually that's not painted. Okay. All right. Okay, so when you are done, before you do the weathering, you are going to end up with a vehicle. If you do boring, it's going to look like this. So basically, boring is black and white, which is a typical van truck. Now, I am going to do this for a refrigeration company, is what I decided. So I'm going to have this sitting at the up where the Allegheny Northern switches. There's a refrigeration company there, and this is going to be one of their trucks at the loading dock. So I'm going to give it some kind of graphic here on the side and then weather it, and that'll be done. But if you want some modern equipment, these metal kits are definitely a way to go. And they go together easy. You're going to put probably 5 to 10 hours into it, depending on the kit you choose. And they're kind of fun to build. And the only thing that really sucks about them, which is why I usually buy them in bulk, where I buy multiples, is you have to kind of wait for certain steps, like certain things have to dry and whatnot. So it just takes a minute to get through everything. So if you have multiple vehicles started at multiple times, then you can kind of just cycle on and off. That's the way I like to do it. So, okay, this is the Altoona N-Scale weekend. So I am going to be bringing you some exciting information in the next video here, and we'll go through all the Altoona stuff.